Hey everyone, Lisa here. Gosh, it's time to do the full moon in Leo forecast for mid-February. Can you believe it? Again, time is just kind of flying away with us. But yeah, this is kind of an interesting full moon. It's first of all, it's one of the full moons that I flagged when I did the Bitcoin 6-month forecast back in December. So I'm going to get into that a little bit in my separate Bitcoin forecast. But the full moon looks particularly bullish for a breakout as far as Bitcoin is concerned. So that's the one thing. The second thing is that there's a lot happening astrologically around this full moon that's quite exciting, actually. So we've got the Venus-Mars conjunction in Capricorn happening on the same day. We've also got a Jupiter-Uranus sextile, which is a kind of a rare transit. It doesn't happen very often, and that happens within 2 days of this full moon, just as the sun ingresses into Pisces. So I'm going to get into both of those important transits in the forecast. Yes, so lots to look forward to, and let's dive in and see what we can expect. So first up, this is kind of an interesting, there's some interesting overlaps in terms of the astrology and the Sabian symbol with round about the time that we had last year between sort of July and August, when we were having the Cancer Capricorn full and new moons, and then the sort of the Leo Aquarius ones. And I was quite interested to see with the Sabian symbol that there was an overlap between this particular Sabian symbol and it might have been the Leo new moon that we had in August, which I'll get into in minutes. But so this Sabian symbol is for the 28th degree of Leo, which is towards the end of the sign, and it's many little birds chirping on the limb of a large tree. So that's kind of interesting because, as I say, back in around about August, we had a very similar Sabian symbol, and that was also about, I think I called it birds of a feather flock together. So you can see here, this was in the 17th degree of Leo, and I called it Birds of a Feather Flock Together. And this was all about kind of volunteer groups that make a social event of kind of coming together and rehearsing, kind of learning new things, like-minded people coming together for a shared purpose. So there's a very interesting, first of all, the theme of birds seems to be back in conjunction with the sign of Leo, which is, I mean, you wouldn't kind of expect it because birds are associated with air, which is more to do with Aquarius, you know, the sort of, or Gemini for that matter, birds particularly associated with Gemini. But there's clearly a link between that period of time and now, because we also back then had a Venus, the last Venus-Mars set of conjunctions in Leo. So there's clearly an important link between that period and this period now, and you might want to kind of consider that as we go through the forecast to see whether you can see any parallels between events and kind of trends that are being highlighted now and then, you know, what happened to you back in sort of July, August 2021. So getting back to the Sabian symbol for this particular full moon, as I said, it's happening in the 28th degree of Leo, and it's interesting. I mean, James Burgess talks about it as being part of those defining moments in life where we must opt for that which feeds our long-term goals. So it's about kind of getting very clear about not only where you see yourself going, which we'll get into when we look at the lunar phase. So in other words, getting rid of certain options, but it's also about a gathering of people with like mind and a kind of a sharing of ideas, but also a narrowing down of your options, or which, you know, kind of working out which ideas or options or opportunities are actually viable. And, you know, I was reminded of this not so long ago when there was a discussion going on Twitter with sort of with regards to education and kind of critical thinking. And I kept thinking back to my time, you know, in school, where I was sort of when I was around about 12 or 13, I was kind of pulled out of my normal classes and into what they call a magnet group, which was, I think, something that was happening kind of worldwide, where they were pulling out certain students and pupils and then putting them onto a different track as far as education was concerned. And one of the things that it gave me the opportunity to do was to be part of what we call the problem-solving team, which took part in sort of local problem-solving competitions. And there was a very set way of actually going about solving problems, and one of them was developing a set of criteria by which you were going to measure your ideas. So first you kind of brainstormed, and there was this kind of like free-for-all where there was no criticism. You could, you know, come up with as many wacky solutions as you liked, and then you narrow them down through a set of criteria which you developed, which you would use as kind of almost questions to sort of ask, well, which of these options meet all of these criteria, and then the one that meets the most of those criteria actually turns out to be the sort of winning solution. So I think it's a similar kind of idea where you get a gathering of either people or ideas coming together, so like birds on a tree. And then there's this need to kind of narrow down and your options through a sort of a process of decision making. And I think that's going to be important given that we are the 28th degree of Leo. So it's coming to the end of Leo. And of course, as Leo kind of sidles into Virgo, you get more and more specific. You know, Virgo is very much about precision and kind of narrowing down options, kind of the small as opposed to the big, which is, you know, Leo tends to be quite big and sort of what's the word, flamboyant. So it's an interesting time, actually, especially when you've got a full moon in Leo, which does tend to sort of be quite flamboyant and to emphasize big emotions, kind of OTT, you know, kind of behavior. So that's interesting. So the Sabian symbol for this is associated with a couple of things. You know, big business, government, bureaucracy, so systems, huge structures where people can kind of get lost. There's a sense of anonymity, and I suppose that is reflecting the sun in Aquarius, which is slightly anonymous and tends to sort of move in groups. Also things like multi-level marketing databases, the internet, social media, online groups, music and book publishing, telephone switchboards. So there's a lot here about kind of vocalizing and communing, mainly through discussion and through sort of, in other words, so through the sort of the top three chakras, so the throat and then the third eye and the crown. So a lot of kind of coming together and a communing of minds, a coming together of shared voices. You know, obviously shared voices speak louder, particularly in sort of political settings, and that seems to be a big theme at the moment. There's a lot going on geopolitically. So yes, I think this particular full moon is really emphasizing the throat center and the need to gain attention or to make a point through vocalizing. So that's just worth remembering. And then when we get to the lunar face, this particular 5 degrees is associated with optimism for James Burgess. So this is kind of emphasizing this sort of more buoyant, fiery, sunny aspect of Leo. And he says we are guided by optimism to see the bigger picture, that when we trust in life and trust in ourselves, we can look for and expect outcomes that sparkle and shine. So this is very solar energy, and I think it's quite nice. It's very upbeat compared to the slightly wintry sort of energy that we've had since we've moved into Aquarius, particularly in the northern hemisphere where it is the coldest part of the year. And you know, it's interesting that we're about to shift into Pisces season, as I say, on the 18th, when we do have that Jupiter-Uranus sextile, we will shift into Pisces season. So we're at an interesting sort of liminal point where I think we're going to see the tide starting to turn as far as sentiment is concerned, and maybe come out of that very bearish energy that we had, you know, in December and January, that sort of leaked into the beginning of February. So this lunar phase is an interesting one. Some of the key points that James Burgess has given for explaining it is things like we tend to give more significance to what we can control than what can control us. So there's a sense of sovereignty, which is so key to the sign of Leo. The idea that all life is cyclical holds the promise of renewal and joy in the hope of a better tomorrow. And of course we are at the end of Leo. That's, you know, the sign. So there is a sense of kind of renewal and joy as we move into the next, you know, as we move into Pisces season and so on. And, you know, the following new moon, which will, you know, be in the sort of the Virgo Pisces axis. And then at defining moments in life, we must opt for that which feeds our long-term goals. So this is about getting, what I was saying about narrowing things down using criteria such as what's going to be best for me long-term, you know, thinking, beginning with the end in mind, if you like. So getting really clear about, you know, not just what is kind of, what feels good right now, but what is going to lay the foundations for where we want to kind of get to in the future. So having that destination in mind as we sort of go forward. And then he says, pure spirit insists that life shines joyfully. So there's also this need to get back to a place of joy, to sort of sit in the solar plexus in a kind of a, you know, recognizing that joy is power, that kind of reveling in our uniqueness, feeling comfortable to shine, having fun, being playful, all of that kind of stuff, and that this allows spirit to sort of shine through, because of course the solar plexus is associated with the element of fire, and of course the element of fire is most associated with spirit in the Platonic systems, because, you know, fire, the flames kind of leap upwards towards the heavens. And of course they are also associated with light. And then he says spiritual integrity generates empowering confidence. And this is what I was saying about the solar plexus. You know, this is really about kind of feeling comfortable in our skins and confident enough to speak from a place of authenticity through the throat. So it's kind of almost linking the solar plexus to the throat and through the heart, which is also, you know, very much associated with the sign of Leo. So yes, I think it's really interesting. It's definitely emphasizing the upper half of the Merkaba, if you like, the upper half of the chakra system, and it's really asking us to come into a place of joy and also celebration, because this is a full moon. So, you know, I think we should see this as a time of optimism and celebration. Now, as far as individual, you know, tendencies and things are concerned, use the cheat sheet to kind of see what you are kind of consolidating, or what you're sort of celebrating, or where you're seeking balance. So this is about 2 signs. So look for your rising sign, and then the corresponding sign on the opposite side will tell you, you know, where the sun is. So look for your rising sign, and that will tell you where the moon is at this full moon. So if, for example, your rising sign is, say, Gemini, then the moon will be in your 3rd house of, you know, immediate everyday environment, and the sun will be in Sagittarius, in the sort of area associated with beliefs, religion, philosophy, higher education and wisdom, that kind of thing. So I'll leave you to pause the video to have a look at your leisure, and I'm going to get on with the forecast. So the full moon chart itself is super interesting for a number of reasons. As I say, there are some really important transits that are happening at this full moon. So we can see here that that Venus and Mars are coming into conjunction with each other, and we can see them here in Capricorn at around about 17 degrees of Capricorn. Coming up for well, they do make the conjunction on the same day. So we'll get into the significance of that separately, but you know, needless to say, it is interesting that they are also making trines to Uranus, whilst Jupiter at the same time is making a sextile to Uranus. So a lot of positive focus on Uranus, and an interesting bringing together of Jupiter and Venus, the two benefics, with Mars through the positive influence of Uranus. So I think this is really giving us a big theme about positive change, about feeling optimistic about the future, and also of things like breakthrough developments, either in like creatively, personally, in terms of relationships, to do with money, and also to do with technology and with like belief systems, and a kind of an opening up, like an expansion of one's horizons, so that you can almost, you feel more optimistic about the future, and you feel more positive about change. But as I say, we'll get into those transits separately. But then what's also interesting about this chart is we've got the sun and the moon on the ascendant-descendant axis. So we've got the Leo moon rising with the ascendant at about 27, as I said, almost 28 degrees of Leo, and of course the sun opposite. And I think this is interesting visually. You know, it means that the sun and the moon will be exactly on the horizon, you know, if you are at the latitudes of sort of you know, London, and so it will look quite interesting, you know, kind of at sunset. Essentially, you know, the moon will start to rise, and while the sun is still up. So it should be quite an interesting looking full moon, you know, kind of visually speaking. And I mean, we've also got some other interesting things happening. We've got the sun and the moon kind of squaring the nodes, which are currently in the fixed signs of Taurus and Scorpio. You know, they changed. That's why we had the eclipses in those signs towards the end of last year. So there's still that eclipse energy very much in play, and it could be that we see some of the trends or the themes from those eclipses kind of coming up now at this full moon, possibly for like to work through certain areas where things are kind of jarring, or where we may need, where some challenges may arise. I mean, there's some tension maybe between sort of different aspects of what we're kind of trying to do, and having to sort of resolve those, because you can see that between the sun and the moon and the nodes we form this huge grand cross here with, you know, this kind of red square. So that is usually a sign of, it's two T-squares essentially, with an emphasis on the nodes. So it's almost as though fated events or kind of herd mentality somehow plays an important role in what happens at this full moon. And it can also, it can sometimes go against or feel kind of antithetical to what it is that we want to achieve or express on a personal level, or as a kind of collective, because of course the sort of the Leo Aquarius polarity is between the individual on one hand and sort of groups on the other, our kind of our shared ideals versus our personal goals and that kind of thing. So it could be that we do feel a little bit torn at this full moon, but I think on the whole it is a very you know, upbeat, optimistic energy because of those really lovely transits that we're having, you know, with Venus, Jupiter, and Mars. Yeah, so those are kind of the main things. So fairly simple, but I think, you know, what we'll see is that it's kind of far from simple, because we are talking about not just interpersonal development. So in other words, this is almost kind of externalized energy, where there's going to be a lot going on as far as our interactions with other people are concerned because of Venus and Mars, and then also with society, like changes in social trends or kind of paradigm shifts happening on a kind of a global level, you know, a sort of on the macro level, because of the outer planets, you know, the social planets like Jupiter and Uranus. So I think our focus is going to be less sort of introverted, as the last few lunar phases have been, and they're going to be a lot more extroverted, more sort of outward facing. And I think that it's going to be important to spend time in groups or with friends, and to sort of see, and with kind of key people, significant others, and see how that interaction brings about shifts or kind of changes of perspective or of circumstance, you know, within our worlds over the next couple of weeks. So as I was saying, one of the key transits that's happening in mid-February is the dance of Venus and Mars, and this essentially started at the end of January, and it activated energy that's going to be in play from February right through until April of 2022. So as I say, there may be links to sort of July, August of 2021. Just bear that in mind. I will give you dates as we move through the next couple of slides, but this is quite important energy, as I say, because these are the two planets associated with kind of beauty, creativity, and like money on one hand, and then you know, Mars being associated with things like will, with kind of fecundity, and also with sort of like life force energy, you know, which kind of drives evolution forward. So yeah, I think it's going to be quite dynamic, interesting energy that's in play between now and basically the end of this eclipse cycle. So yes, February, as I say, sees us entering into the orb of this very long Venus-Mars conjunction, which happens first in Capricorn and then Aquarius. So essentially the energies that we're talking about started on the 28th of January, and they'll go right through until the 5th of April 2022. So this first conjunction, which happens in mid-February, happens in Capricorn. So this is, of course, Earth energy, cardinal Earth, and it's exact on the 16th of February at 17 degrees of Capricorn. So if you've got planets, cardinal planets in around about those positions, you may be affected more than most people. And you know, it also occurs very close to Valentine's Day and within days of this Jupiter-Uranus sextile. So as I say, it could very much influence interpersonal relationships, whether these be creative partnerships, romantic sort of liaisons, or you know, whether it just has something to do with you shifting your values and the way that you go about doing things, you know, on some level. But it's very much a combining of masculine and feminine energies in a way that brings about kind of beauty and inspiration and like a love for life, you know, which is very kind of 5D. So as I say, I do think the energies will be quite elevated during this period overall, which is nice. It makes a change from those Saturn-Uranus squares that made everyone really kind of fearful and sort of anxious. And anyway, so then the second conjunction happens in Aquarius, and this is beginning of March, so close to the Pisces new moon on the 2nd of March. And so this will give air and fire signs a chance to sort of benefit from the energies, whereas of course the first conjunction benefits more people who've got sort of earth and water placements. So it will also interestingly make a joint conjunction to Pluto in Capricorn in March, before changing signs. So that's super interesting. So in other words, you get this almost crescendo, this dramatic crescendo happening as these planets hit the end degrees of Capricorn with Pluto, and then you get the shift into the new energy. So I think it will feel quite profound. It might feel quite marked, the shift in energy. So it's just worth bearing in mind as we kind of get to this period. That there might be quite a noticeable kind of bump in the energy, or a noticeable paradigm shift kind of happening, or in terms of external events, big changes happening within relationships or in sort of creative or money matters. So that's just worth sort of thinking about. And then, as I said, there are links to July of 2021, because the last time we experienced a conjunction between Venus and Mars was in July, in the sign of Leo. So the energy was in play from around about the 29th of June to about the 25th of July, but the exact conjunction was on the 10th of July 2021 in Leo, which is of course a fire element. So that would have affected people who've got fire and air placements the most. But also what was interesting was that on the same day we had the Cancer new moon. So interesting that we've got this happening again, where we've got a full moon, we've got a Leo full moon, and we've got the Venus-Mars conjunction on the same day. So it's in the sign that was the same sign as the last Venus-Mars conjunction in Leo. And then, as I say, back then it happened on the same day as a new moon. So there's something very interesting kind of going on here between Venus-Mars and the lunar cycle. So back at the July new moon, I talked a lot about the Sabian symbol, which was all about sacred union. So it's very interesting how all these things sort of fit together, all these themes kind of weave together, because of course, in terms of certainly in terms of relationships and love astrology, the combining of Venus and Mars is seen as really beneficial in relationships. It sort of blends kind of love and beauty with kind of passion and desire. So it's really exciting energy, very sort of high octane, if you like. And as I say, we are now experiencing these conjunctions in first Earth and then air, between February and March. So I think if you don't feel these the conjunction in February, I think you're more likely to feel it in March, and a lot will depend on your natal placements as to whether these conjunctions happen close to your natal placements or in aspect to your natal placements. So the Capricorn conjunction happens mid-sign, so as I say 17 degrees, and then the conjunction in Aquarius happens in the early degrees, because both Venus and Mars ingress into Aquarius on the same day, and then they make their conjunction. So this will be the early degrees of air signs or fixed signs, that will kind of feel it the most. But it's definitely one to watch, and I think it definitely adds a kind of exciting magical air to things, which I think is kind of welcome. I think everyone sort of could do with less war and a bit more kind of love and peace. So hopefully, Venus will be sort of offsetting Mars in that sense, and yes, and we will all kind of feel the love, as it were. And then we move on to this Jupiter-Uranus sextile. So as I said, this happens on the 18th of February, on the same day that the Sun ingresses into Pisces. So just within a few days of this full moon. And again, as I said, this is quite a rare transit. It doesn't happen that often. So it's well worth celebrating. And I thought it was interesting when I had a look at my at the forecast at the beginning of the year. I noticed that 2022 doesn't really have any negative outer planetary transits, which is really nice, because the last 2 years we've had some really, really difficult ones, from those Saturn-Pluto conjunctions that we had in 2020, and then the Saturn-Uranus squares in 2021. So this I think will maybe give us a sense of the more kind of jubilant energy that 2022 has to offer, which fits with the fact that it's a 6 year, which is the number of Venus, and so it's all about kind of harmony, balance, and love and peace, all those kind of Venusian things. So what's so super interesting is that it takes place at 11 degrees of Taurus and Pisces. These are mutable earth and water signs. So again, I think the people who've got placements at 11 degrees of the fixed and well, the mutable signs will probably feel this the most. But it's an interesting combination. It's very fertile and sort of filled with seed potential, this combining of Taurus and Pisces. So what does this kind of mean? Well, if we take things from the sort of the Jupiter end, we are talking about positive changes in the world. So positive paradigm shifts, expansion in consciousness, aha moments, social tipping points, big ideas really kind of gaining traction. And then from the Uranian end, we're talking about monumental technological breakthroughs or scientific discoveries that benefit mankind. So this is really kind of about that sort of making a difference, being sort of inventive or innovative in a way that is inspiring and that is sort of uplifting. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of comes, what gets announced, or what is sort of like is in the collective consciousness around about the time of this sextile. And then from an individual level, obviously depends on, as I say, first of all, your own kind of Jupiter and Uranus placements, and where these particular planets will be at the time of their sextile, in your chart. But essentially, it's associated with exciting but meaningful events that kind of open up your world, if you like. So there's this kind of expansion that happens, particularly in terms of your beliefs and your perceptions. So it opens you up to new ways of perceiving and living, and allows you to make life changes that lead to kind of adventures, so journeys of exploration. So kind of having the confidence to sort of like be a bit more adventurous and to explore more, which is obviously something that we've been prevented from doing, with all these kind of travel restrictions and so on. And then the other way that it works, particularly with Uranus, is it can also bring us into contact with new friendships or groups that encourage personal growth, or that lead to opportunities, for abundance, success, and expansion. Because of course Jupiter is the planet of good luck and expansion, and of kind of optimism, and Uranus is the planet of kind of change, innovation, and and seeing things from fresh perspective. So, if you've been kind of grappling with a problem for a long time, particularly around, the time of those Saturn-Uranus squares in mid-February, mid-June, and, again in December, it could be that you find solutions now, that solutions almost kind of drop into your lap, as to how you can kind of find, you can, workarounds to sort of get you through those problems, and definitely breakthroughs. This is a time of kind of particularly sort of like mental breakthroughs, and also of ideas kind of finally catching. So very often we have these kind of tipping points where an idea has been around for a while, but all of a sudden it gains acceptance. And I do kind of feel that we're on the verge of a major kind of paradigm shift globally, for the better. So that's, I think, with something to look forward to. And then as far as fixed star aspects, there are a couple more associated with the Venus-Mars conjunction than with the Leo full moon itself. But of course, this happens on the same day, so it's still important. So Venus and Mars, first of all, will be making a conjunction to the part of courage, which is one of the 7 Hermetic lots I think I spoke about before. And this is the Arabic part or lot associated with Mars. So it's about facing our fears, and shows us where we need to exhibit courage. This is, I think, a big theme, is fortitude and courage. So it's based on the relationship between kind of the part of fortune, which is about the physical body, and one's actions, Mars. So it's a lot about kind of that sense of, if you don't kind of do anything, nothing will happen. Or it's sort of learning to, the opposite could be true, like not overdoing things. If you have a tendency to kind of, leap before you look, kind of curbing that impulsiveness. But it's interesting. I mean, the astrologers say that where this lot is placed by house will often show what we have to face up to and what we most fear in terms of, life events or areas where we may feel particularly fearful. So it might be worth, just getting that calculated to see how this, how this works for you kind of personally. But I think on a kind of collective level, it's about facing up to what we are afraid of, in terms of relationships, obstacles to intimacy, that kind of thing. It could also be creative blocks, or, maybe physical blocks, something to do with how we feel about our bodies, kind of body image, that type of thing. So yeah, that's interesting. And then Mars is also going to be conjunct the fixed star Rookbot, which is the alpha star in the front leg of Sagittarius. So you can see Sagittarius kind of here, and Rookbot I think sort of sits somewhere around here. And so it's derived from the Arabic word rukba, which means knee. And I mean, you can see that it's kind of, like bending the knee, taking the knee, that kind of thing, or simply about being flexible, because, a lot of people see the knee as sort of like a mini heart chakra. So Bernadette Brady is associated with the steady stance of the archer, and she says it's associated with the ship's rudder. So it kind of provides a sort of a sense of solidity or steadiness or stability, from which we can then take action or launch ourselves. So it's interesting. So it talks about anchoring oneself or being a rock for others. So somehow foundations here are kind of important. That's the theme that's been consolating the last few days. So it could be that it's a time to lay the groundwork for a new structure that's designed to last, or it could be that you are somehow creating or building a legacy, a base, or a kind of founding idea, or even an institutional structure that has the potential to sort of impact a lot of people or to last a long time. So it's interesting. What are you thinking about starting now? May have legs, if you like, sort of, maybe has the ability to kind of go the distance. So it's important to kind of get things right, to sort of start off on the right foot. And what I do think is so interesting is that nearby to this particular star is Corona Australis. So this is the southern crown, or the victory wreath, as opposed to Corona Borealis, which is the northern crown. And so there may be something in here about sport. Sagittarius is associated with sport a lot. And so Mars is as well as associated with kind of physical strength and vitality. So it may be that there are some important sporting breakthroughs or records, that kind of thing. And of course we've got the Olympics kind of going on, but it's also about victory. So it's kind of victory over overcoming obstacles. I think of the Six of Wands in the tarot. It's very similar to that kind of energy of feeling jubilant after having overcome some difficulties. So there may be something in that as well, where you kind of tapping into this Leo full moon energy of celebration, because you've reached a certain important kind of hallmark or benchmark, if you like, in terms of sort of achieving things. So yeah, again positive energy. Yeah, so that's kind of it from me. Short and sweet. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you're kind of interested, I am running some special offers on relationship reports for members of my website. So if you want to benefit from those discounts, then sign up at astrologysphere.com/subscribe. There are different levels of membership, starting with a free level. So yes, take a look at that if you're interested. But yes, I hope you are having a wonderful Valentine's week. Enjoy all that fabulous Jupiter-Uranus energy that's around. And yes, I'll catch you again in a couple of weeks for my next forecast.